placed. Okay, crisis. Well, that's certainly the Middle East. So, Mark, let's bring you back on. And I think you've got some interesting things to tell us about Greater Israel.
Yes, indeed. The idea of Israel being expansionist beyond its current borders is a theme that's come up many times over the decades, and it's largely attributed to the radical Zionist movement. Well, if it's only a radical fringe or only part of the overall Israeli policy, why is the image of a greater Israel popping up everywhere? The slide to the left here was off social media. Of course, the British government tells us you can't trust anything there unless it's their own. But I thought, well, is that real? And then the slide to the right comes from the Times of Israel, the actual Jewish press. So evidently it is. And the headline there is Smotrich. This is a financial minister under Netanyahu. He says there's no Palestinian people, no such thing, he claims, but he declares his family are the real Palestinians. But how can there be real Palestinians if there are no Palestinian people to begin with, right? What's his logic? Anyway, this is also from the Times of Israel, which, by the way, the Jewish press will oftentimes reveal more about what's going on in the Israeli government than the Western press overall. And it's kind of an ironic thing. But anyway, speaking in Paris at a private memorial service for prominent right-wing Likud activist and Jewish Agency board member Jacques Kupfer, who passed away after a battle with cancer, this finance minister under Netanyahu, Mr. Smotrich, said there was no such thing as Palestinians because there's no such thing as the Palestinian people, quote unquote. A rather bold remark, I might add. A comment that was met with applause and cheers from attendees. Do you know who are the Palestinians? Asked the head of the ultra-nationalist religious Zionism party and Israel's finance minister. This is, of course, Mr. Smotrich. I'm Palestinian, he said, also mentioning his grandmother who was born in the northern Israeli town of Metula 100 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. And I highlighted the part Smotrich was speaking from a podium that featured a map of Greater Israel that included the territory of modern-day Jordan in accordance with the hardline aspirations by some early Zionist groups. And I put the link down there if others want to see the entirety of this article by the Times of Israel. Mr. Smotrich has a history of making inflammatory statements, says the Times of Israel, against Palestinians, against Arab citizens of Israel, against non-Orthodox Jews, and against the LGBTQ community, including once declaring himself, quote, a proud homophobe, and so on and so forth. And it's interesting how the Israeli press will come down on Mr. Smotrich for these right-wing views, but the United States government will not do the same. Even though the United States government will tell you that any other right-wing government on earth is something to be feared or something to be dealt with in a very stern manner. It's funny how the Israeli state, being labeled right-wing, gets a pass, and they can basically do whatever they want. But if you're Viktor Orban or any other right-wing government, you're something to be feared. You're a menacing entity. Anyway, the image on the podium of Mr. Smotrich, the finance minister, is not the only place where the image of Greater Israel is popping up. This social media item here shows Israeli soldiers wearing a badge on their uniform, showing a map of Greater Israel, which includes parts of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Greater Israel in its entirety includes the entirety of Palestine, the entirety of Jordan, parts of Iraq, parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, parts of Egypt and Turkey, and even parts of Saudi Arabia. Now, that might seem like an unrealistic thing for Israel to achieve, but it's interesting that it's even on some of the Israeli uniforms, which does indicate kind of an ideological goal, if you will, a geopolitical goal. And this is from Roya News, offering further confirmation that this is happening. Greater Israel map display, soldiers' uniform patch raises alarm. And we'll keep moving from there. This is from that same source. The image of the soldier with the controversial patch surfaced on social media, quickly igniting a storm of reactions, we're told here. Critics argue that the map reflects an expansionist agenda, and get the irony here, reminiscent of historical imperial ambitions, drawing comparisons to Nazi Germany's concept of Lebensraum, or living space. The concept of Greater Israel is rooted in certain interpretations of Zionist ideology, which assert the biblical promised land, extends from the Nile River in Egypt to the Euphrates River in Iraq. This interpretation has been a subject of contention since the founding of the Israeli occupation, with proponents viewing it as a fulfillment of religious prophecy, and critics, however, condemning it as a justification for territorial expansion at the expense of neighboring states' sovereignty. So there's a lot of implications here, but it's something that has gone largely unreported, Brian. And one wonders if in the dusty blueprints of the Israeli state, or maybe not so dusty blueprints, whether this is the ultimate goal of Israeli military maneuvers right now, and what's going on in Gaza and what led to that has been largely just an excuse or a springboard for that. Of course, time will tell. It may seem doubtful in a way, but it's something to keep a very close eye on. Netanyahu is not getting any younger, and he wants to keep that foreign aid from the United States flowing in. And we'll just see if this becomes a reality, if Israel would flex its muscle that much. But it's interesting where this is popping up, and we'll see where it goes.
Mark, thank you very much for that. Extremely interesting. And I just want to end that segment by saying that a couple of days ago, I put out a request for members of the Jewish community to talk to the UK column. We've been finding it very difficult to get members of the Jewish community to engage. We know that people who are Jewish but are challenging policies of their own government, many of them are frightened of their own government, which has been an astonishing thing for me to learn. But we have been contacted by some individuals, and I just wanted to say, if there's any members of the Jewish community watching today, thank you for making contact with the UK column, and we will be in contact with you very shortly.